When Nazis and commies gathering the fray, Mr. Skeleton comes out to play, crushing these cowards every day. You know me, bring them to their knees. This way of thinking is a disease. What's it gonna take to make them see? Every time the handcuffs come around, Mr. Debunking will be throwing down teeth in the ruffian AP, the supreme one of anarchy. Mr. Debunking.
Imagine if you bought a new car and the tires that came with it couldn't be replaced. If anything happens to them, tough luck. Go pay 80% the price of a new car to get them fixed at an authorized repair shop.
Seriously, one of the dumbest arguments ever. Everybody knows capitalism, at the heart of capitalism, is competition. Let's say there is like a market that's being highly taken advantage of by this one company that has a monopoly, not a natural monopoly, not a forced monopoly by government, but there's only one business making this product, right? And anyways, they're taking advantage of the customer. And yeah, that gives perfect opportunity for someone to come in and make millions, and they will do that. They'll make a business where it is needed, and they will reap the rewards. And the company that was screwing over the customer will naturally go away. They will bankrupt, as they should. They shouldn't exist in the market because they don't have the consumer's best interest in mind. That's what should happen to every bad business. And if they want to survive, they have to change their outlook, find other ways to make money other than screwing over the customer, because that will only lead to their customers leaving. So this makes even the most greediest of companies 100% honest and outgoing because they want to stay in business. When you own a business and you got 14 businesses popping up to steal your monopoly, yeah, you're going to play ball and you're going to offer the best product available and you're going to offer a better price and you're going to be the best business you possibly could be. You're going to try your best not to mess up because public perception is everything under capitalism. If you are morally bankrupt or bad for the environment, people won't do business with you. And you're definitely not going to do anything like you mentioned that would screw over the customer like that, because that would lead to bad reviews, and bad reviews is bad publicity, and you know how people are. They'll essentially cancel you. They'll lose their customer base just by one bad incident. All it takes is one evil act, then you're notorious for it, and then you'll lose customers as a result. And yeah, you got to work hard to earn your customers' trust again, and they'll do what's right. And if they don't, their company will die, and as it should. It shouldn't exist if it's evil. But I already know your solution. Your solution is to have government basically regulate these companies. Basically make sure they play nice. Why would you want a company that's trying to backstab you and exploit the customer? Why would you want them to exist in the first place? Why would you want them to exist longer than they should? Like, I want them gone, out of the market. I don't want them to exist in the marketplace at all. I only want like good people and good people with good intentions to survive. Government does the least capitalist thing ever and tries to save these companies by regulating them and making them play nice. But when you make like 1,000 laws to regulate a business, what happens is you make it really expensive to run a business. And you basically regulate the businesses until they don't move anymore, until they die. I don't think you could even fathom how much it costs to start a business. It costs a lot because of all the regulations. Regulations don't help businesses, especially the good ones. In fact, they only help the bad businesses. That's why I say fuck government and fuck giving them more control, especially over the market. Do you have any idea what happens when you let government fucking regulate the goddamn businesses? What happens is the businesses lobby the government, pay the government to write laws that favor the massive corporations Then they write laws that make them immune to competition, which makes it so that the prices get raised because there's no competitors lowering the prices. And because they have this unfair monopoly market, they have advantages that other companies don't, and they could strive even when they're doing evil acts. So you could thank yourself for that. Government does that.
You wouldn't ever put up with this with cars, so why do you do so with phones and their batteries?
People typically don't put up with it at all. They just are smart consumers, and they don't get gypped like that. They go to somebody that offers a better product. The reason why we put up with it with phones is because it makes the device that much thinner. It makes it sleeker. There's advantages to it. It makes it run a little bit cooler because you have more space to put fans. Or instead, you can make it run a little bit faster because now you have more room for processing power. And people replace their phones every 3 years or so. So usually you don't need to replace your battery ever. You just get a new phone. So that's why those phones don't have interchangeable batteries, and you can't just like swap it out. By the time the battery will die and you got to replace it, the phone's already outdated and nearly worthless.
Have you ever noticed that most printers you buy are both dirt cheap and absolute garbage, but the ink is ridiculously expensive? Well, that's an intentional strategy. Hook you in with a cheap printer only for you to be tied to insane cartridge prices.
They have cheap printers with cheap ink, bro. You just gotta be a smart consumer and do your research and choose the right printer.
With the printer giving you intentionally wrong readings on your ink levels, forcing you to go out and get more when you don't really need more. Don't even think about refilling or, God forbid, third-party cartridges. It's such a wasteful strategy that some people simply buy a whole other printer instead because it could turn out to be cheaper. Why is it this way? Let me illustrate with a telling example. In the 1920s, the Phoebus Cartel, a collection of all major light bulb producers, got together to agree on reducing the effective lifetime of their light bulbs to 1,000 hours, down from 2,500 hours that was standard at the time, while increasing the price without fear of competition. This is an effective reduction of more than half, and they got away with it too.
Got away with it too. They didn't even last 5 years. They didn't play ball, so they just died out. How is that getting away with it too? You're acting like they still exist today. They didn't even last 5 years, man. What is this bullshit? You are a liar.
Nylon, which could pull trucks out of ditches for military purposes, was intentionally structurally weakened in manufacture of clothing so that you buy more once said clothing inevitably rips.
Yeah, because clothes are just ripping and falling apart all over the place, right? No, they don't. The reason why they made it thinner is because it's to reduce cost. And that's good for you, too. Now you spend less on clothes. You don't need the sturdiest clothes in the world, okay? To pull a fucking truck out of a goddamn river, okay? Like you just mentioned, it doesn't need to be that strong. Affordability is more important to most people.
This leads to the question, why does it seem like things break more often now?
What are you talking about? Products are getting simultaneously better and cheaper. And it's precisely due to that little thing I mentioned earlier called competition.
We've all had or seen old appliances, electronics, or otherwise that have lasted many years, in some instances even decades. So what changed? Planned obsolescence, a policy of producing consumer goods that rapidly become obsolete and so require replacing, achieved by frequent change in design, termination of the supply of spare parts, and the use of non-durable materials. We've all heard of the concept before, it's tired at this point. Intentionally making things that break more often, artificially slowing them down or reducing their usability through software updates, or vicious marketing aimed at psychologically engineering an unfashionable image around a still working product. As a result, this reduces the time in between repeat purchases of said product, generating a larger volume of sales in the long term. This is referred to as shortening the replacement cycle in business speak.
Why do you think phones are so cheap right now? It's because people replace them every 2 or 3 years, right? So everyone's buying new phones, and the manufacture of them is very common and therefore very cheap because of all the competition. Okay, competition makes things cheap. Okay, shortening the living cycle of an object means that you're ramping up the production of it, and ramping up the production ramps up the competition and lowers the prices.
What this means for you, in concrete terms, is stuff breaks down or becomes less and less usable, forcing you to spend more money and increase waste. To quote Vance Packard, the famous critic of consumerism, in essence, it is the systematic attempt of business to make us wasteful, debt-ridden, permanently discontented individuals. How exactly is this done, though? Let's name a few strategies. Repair locking, an Apple favorite, of course. Many electronic devices and components could easily be repaired, but it is now becoming company policy to make that impossible, either through making replacement parts unavailable, making them overly expensive and only open to purchase for authorized stores, or through warranty voiding agreements.
Then make them humble. Don't do business with them. They'll back down. Trust me. Because if they don't, their business will die.
Pentalobe screws, 5-pointed flower-shaped screws that are incompatible with regular screwdrivers, are placed to prevent easy removal with tools you might already have around the house. Likewise, irreplaceable batteries with a short lifetime are common practice. Sometimes they're even glued in. This leaves you with no other choice than to buy a new device, even if the old one was perfectly fine for your purposes. Otherwise, you can go to an authorized repair shop and pay up to 70 or 80% of the original price of the phone, again simply pushing you to buy a new one instead.
Or don't do business with people that you believe to be scam artists. It's that simple. No one's putting a gun to your head and saying, you gotta buy a fucking iPhone. No one's doing that. Don't buy an iPhone if you think it's a ripoff. Stop buying an iPhone and make your voice heard. Say, I don't like this practice. That's why I'm done doing business with you. They will change their mind if enough people stop doing business with them.
Software limitation and manipulation. Another Apple favorite, but of course not restricted to them by any means. Examples include new sets of updates being rolled out only for them to be denied to your 3-year-old phone for no reason other than encouraging you to buy the next model up. Meanwhile, prior to new releases, old devices are intentionally slowed down or otherwise limited to encourage new sales.
I just looked it up. Apple notoriously updates their phones for 6 years. So what are you talking about? None of what you say is true.
Batteries are repair locked and intentionally built to significantly degrade after a product cycle, say for example 2 years. Again, so you get another phone entirely rather than the sensible thing of simply replacing the battery.
They don't plan them to fail. They make the best batteries they fucking can. How do I know this? Because almost every phone that I've ever owned is like 4 or 5 years or 6 years old, and the batteries still run. They're batteries that cannot be replaced. So what do you mean they last 2 years? That, again, isn't true.
In my own field, medicine, planned obsolescence is rampant, with many things produced for single use with the intention of discarding them and purchasing more, rather than reprocessing them for several rounds of use, which is a possibility. The most typical example is through downgrading materials to ensure that after very little use, the device falls apart. Hospitals have seen manufacturers downgrading material to the point where device obsolescence may actually happen during the first use rather than after the case.
So you're saying that every product in the medical industry is can't even be used once? That's just factually untrue. There's more than one place that makes medical equipment. You do realize that, right? It's not just one company that makes that shit. So if one is screwing you over, do business with the other. Find a company that makes shit a little bit more robust if it's breaking at the first use, which is unheard of. Don't get me wrong, I'm sure it's happened, but it's not commonplace, especially like you're pretending.
Contrived durability. An extension of the above, it's when there is a conscious strategy before manufacture of shortening the lifetime of a product by reducing the lifetime, usually the durability, of its subcomponents. As a result, the product deteriorates far more quickly due to fragile or lower quality parts and hence encourages more replacement purchases. This is especially insidious as it is difficult to detect and be able to follow through on legally, hence making legislation against it basically impossible.
Legislation against it basically being impossible is because it's just not fucking true. People make cheap products because the consumer doesn't want to pay a lot for it. What's the first thing that consumers look for? It's price, right? And price determines quality. You idiot! Lowering the price comes at a cost. It comes at the quality of the product, obviously. That is, it's going to be less robust, definitely. Especially if you get the cheapest thing on the market. Yeah, it's going to be less robust. That is obvious. But that doesn't mean there's some conspiracy to make the product fail so you buy more of them. Okay? Because I know when I buy a product and it fails, I don't buy the same fucking product by the same fucking company. I buy from a different company completely.
Programmed obsolescence. The easiest to detect of the bunch and fairly common with, for example, printers. Inkjet printer manufacturers place chips in their ink cartridges to prevent them from being used after a certain number of pages are printed or certain amount of time has passed, even though the cartridge itself has up to 50% usable ink left. Canon was even sued over a printer/scanner model that disabled the scanning function till new ink cartridges were installed.
Yeah, that is pretty messed up. Don't do business with them. Let that company die. It deserves to die. In fact, your solution is to keep it alive in the market for longer. How do you not see you, sir, are the problem? You are making this evil-ass company exist for longer than it should. You do that by trying to regulate it and keep it alive. And while you're regulating it, you're just crushing all these companies that are starting up that can't afford all these regulations.
Perceived obsolescence, on the other hand, is another monstrosity of capitalism in which things that are perfectly fine and usable are deemed quote-unquote out of fashion through manipulative advertising intended on driving consumption. Nowhere is this more common than in the fashion industry, which has constant reboots of seasonal collections with little to no real variation so that you keep buying. Constant aesthetic switching in which one style goes out for a new one to come in only for the original to come back again is dogma in the fashion industry.
This video you have created is garbanzo. Garbanzo. Because there's only one thing you have to do when someone tries to rip you off under capitalism. And that thing is, don't fucking buy it. It's seriously a simple concept, and it's something that most people do automatically.
This, of course, doesn't skip playing on every real or advertising-driven manufactured insecurity in people so that they, again, consume. To quote Brooks Stevens, the one who popularized the term, planned obsolescence is instilling in the buyer the desire to own something a little newer, a little better, a little sooner than is necessary. All these lead to ridiculous overburdening of recycling capabilities if they even exist in the first place, and in turn mostly ends up as environmental waste, and that's not even mentioning the environmental damage from the production process in the first place.
What are you talking about? Most phones get recycled. They get reused by somebody else, or you turn them in and you could get money. Most people do the latter option and get their money back for their phone, or it pays for a portion of their phone. But yeah, most people do that, but to you, it doesn't exist. Bullshit, again. I reward you no points.
The average lifespan of a smartphone in the US is less than 2 years, and in 2010 alone, 141 million smartphones were discarded, with 89% ending up in landfills.
Yes, 89% of phones end up in landfills. They don't recycle the whole fucking phone, you idiot. They only recycle certain pieces of it, and then scrap the rest in landfills.
This sort of overproduction and waste further fans imperialist domination and conflicts within the regions where the materials
Yada yada yada.
necessary are extracted, like with cobalt in the Congo. Prior to this riveting development of capitalism becoming ubiquitous, things actually kinda lasted, so long as you maintain them semi-reasonably. An anecdotal example from my life: my father bought a Parlux hairdryer in the late 1990s that I have used until 2 years ago, when it fell and I cracked the plastic handle. Had I chosen to repair it, I would still be using it for probably many years to come. Think about that though. 20 plus years for a hairdryer that costs pretty much nothing in the grand scheme of things. The oven and stove I used in university was over 25 years old, and likewise with the microwave. Check your grandma's house if you doubt me. Alright, this is all well and good, but why is this so? Simply, capitalism. The logic of the system dictates that profits should be above all. How do you best maximize profits? By sticking to strict environmental regulation, antitrust and anti-monopoly laws perhaps? Maintaining ethical business practices if such a thing even exists? No, of course not.
The huge human element that you're missing here is the public's perception of you. Okay, if it's bad, your business is going to fail. If it's good, it's going to thrive. So guess what that makes you do? The best business practices you could possibly think of. Not the worst, the best. That means being environmentally friendly. That means paying higher wages. That means trying to make the world a better place.
You need to beat the other guy in the market. What this means is buy out or sabotage the competition so that you win.
How do you buy out the competition unless you're just buying their business and just expanding your own? Sabotage the competition. How do you do that? The only way you could do that is by out-competing them and offering better services at better prices, which is a good thing. It helps the consumer.
This means use your political contacts to lobby for loopholes for you, whether it be taxes or environmental legislation.
That's a government problem, and that's something that you're the one who put government into the mix. You're the one who wants government involved in everything, and you're the one who gets government involved in everything, especially regulating the market. That's your whole strategy, is to have the fucking market be regulated by government. How can you not see that that's the problem? You said it yourself. Government creates monopolies by rigging the market in the corporation's favor. So why would you ever let them regulate the market? I don't understand you. It's like you know the answers, but you're just too ignorant to see it. Stop letting them regulate the free market. Keep the free market free and let the fucking customers regulate it with their wallets. Letting government regulate the market just means that the government's going to whore itself out and let the highest bidder regulate the market, the corporation with the most money.
Offshore labor and pay them pennies on the dollar. Employ a massive network of sinister advertising so that you use and abuse every single option at your disposal so that you sell and sell more. Of course, planned obsolescence sits comfortably in this scheme. It's simply the logic, or rather lack of logic, of the system. Furthermore, planned obsolescence feeds the constant cycling of money and capital of the system, which is one of the ways capitalist economic policy tries to, but completely fails at, avoiding recessions. Overproduction without consumption causes a crisis in the market. So spend. Aside from low interest rates and other incentives, let's also manipulate the production process itself so that we increase waste and waste more people's time for a nonsensical social.
Okay, let's say you go to Circle K, right, and you notice a lot of poor people outside and begging for money and stuff. They're starving, and it's a bad situation. Anyways, they throw away food every day. They throw away lots of donuts, for example. They could instead give that to the poor, but they don't because of regulations by the government, because they don't want to get sued for liability. And that's the same reason why grocery stores get rid of all this food that's totally fresh and ready to eat. It's because they don't want to get sued by government. Government has also made it illegal to hand that food out. So that's why it all ends up in the trash, and that's why we have waste. Again, because of your precious government.
Socioeconomic system not compatible with the planet we live on. This was official post-Great Depression policy too, by the way. So what do? What's the solution? Reformism isn't the key. One solution by the Environmental Law Institute is to create legal penalties, for example lawsuits for breaking perceived anti-obsolescence laws. But this is a solution that hasn't worked for tax dodging, emission report data fudging, or pretty much any other field. If they can't simply lobby to get the law cancelled, then they'll play expensive legal games wasting tax money before at best paying a moderate fine, or at worst nothing coming of it. Afterwards, they simply diversify their production process so that you can't really catch them to the letter of the law. And finally, they have holdings, manufacture, etc., all in countries with no anti-obsolescence laws, so you couldn't prosecute them even if you really wanted to. It's a game made by and for capitalists.
All this does is just give more power to government, who's just going to sell it to the highest bidder. And they're going to regulate the market in a way that's going to be bad. That's going to be bad for the environment. That's going to be bad for the consumer. You're fucking stupid.
You won't beat them at it. Short-term solutions, like repairing items yourself or properly maintaining them, is a decent personal step, but it won't help climate change nor change the current structures that be. Right to repair legislation, motions to prevent active attempts at planning such obsolescence, they're all good, but can be taken away at a moment's notice, as with every other concession from the ruling class under capitalism.
So your solution is to write legislation that's going to force people to have phone batteries that are replaceable. So their phones are going to be less thin. Their phones are going to be less sleek. They're going to have less room for processing power. They're going to have less room for fans. They're going to have less room for cameras. They're going to have less room for innovation.
Socialism is the only real solution. Of course, in a systemic sense, but let's take an example to drive the point home. In 1970s East Germany, a university research lab managed to develop a new form of strengthened glass. They took the idea to the relevant authorities, were given a patent for the invention, and immediately received state support for developing this into a standard. This standard would be termed superfest, a form of glass chemically strengthened to the point of it basically being indestructible with normal day use. They aimed for it to be 5 times as durable, but ended up making it 15 times as durable as regular glass, all with increased heat resistance, lower weight, and increased stackability. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and merging of the two Germanys, the West German government immediately shut down all plants and ceased production of the glass, with a West German businessman stating, "Why should we take a glass that doesn't break? We make money with our glasses. Who saws off the branch on which they are sitting?" Capitalist thought process in action.
You know, every time you break a glass, that's planned obsolescence. Greedy people exist, so there's going to be greedy people in the market, and you're going to get greedy quotes like that. But that doesn't mean that everybody in capitalism is greedy. The reason why the super glass is probably not manufactured today is probably because it costs a hell of a lot to manufacture. It's just not economically viable, most likely. It's not because of planned obsolescence.
For more on why capitalism is a failing system and why socialism is the answer, check out these 2 videos. If you're interested in learning more about planned obsolescence, I suggest you check out Made to Break by Giles Slade for a good, albeit liberal perspective.
Alright guys, this video is almost 30 minutes long. As you can tell, it was a lot of work. If you guys liked it, the least you can do is just leave a comment saying how much you enjoyed it and why you enjoyed it and what you thought of my perspective. And yeah, that'll be enough to probably make me make more in the future, because I haven't made videos like this in years because it just I feel I don't get enough exposure. But if you share it, that'll help too. And if you really liked it, you could donate to my Patreon, of course. And if you really, really liked it, and this is like really awesome when people do this, is leave a one-time donation. All right, guys, links in the description box. Thank you.